Welcome back to Driving Deals, the podcast where we talk about dealership ownership, acquisitions, succession planning, and all the trends shaping automotive retail. Today, we are down at the beach following the Tri State Dealer Conference, and I'm Gerrick Wilkins, joined with my special guest, Ryan Mayer, dealer extraordinaire. Ryan has built many dealerships, he's acquired dealerships, he's sold dealerships. He served on Honda's National Dealer Advisory Board. He's held many leadership roles, including the incoming chairman of the Alabama Auto Dealer Association. So it is a great honor to have you with us. And most importantly, I'd consider you a friend.
Well, thank you, Jarek. I'm happy to be here.
Well, this is exciting time for us in this industry. There's so much happening. Ryan has been actively involved in both acquisitions. He's been involved in dispositions. He's part of the Canon Motors team. So I think his perspectives today will be very, very unique. So Ryan, before we get into specifics, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your journey in automotive and what brought us to today?
Okay, well, that's I'm going to try and keep a long story relatively short here, but I grew up in South Dakota, Jarek, and I joined the Army out of high school. And I ended up at Fort Rucker, which is in the southeast corner of the state of Alabama. And when I got out of the service, I realized I didn't want to go back to 3 feet of snow on the ground 6 months out of the year. So I moved to Birmingham to go to school at UAB, use my GI Bill, and I started selling cars before the next semester started. And I was pretty good at selling cars. In my first month, I sold 18 cars. I made like $7,000, and I looked down and I thought to myself, well, this can't be right. I mean, that's like half of what I made the entire year in the military. So fast forward month two, sold 20 cars, did it again. And I'm like, if I can keep this journey up and do this for a year, I'll have my entire 4 year degree paid for and I'll be set. But the automobile business kind of got in my blood, if you will. And I was a finance manager 14 months later, and college was kind of an afterthought. And I really got quite an education in the automotive field. But I was fortunate to get with some great mentors and some great people that gave me a tremendous amount of opportunity. Tamaron really is the only place I've ever worked. And I started selling cars and got into finance and sales management, and eventually became a general sales manager, then a partner with my previous partner, Tom Atchison, at a Honda store in Daphne, Alabama. And I did that in 2006. And Tom had passed away in 2014. And at that time, I owned 15% of that Honda store. I had a phantom stock purchase that was realized, and I became partners with his trust. And over the next 10 years, I ended up with the majority of that store, as well as the trust helped invest in several other ventures with me. And I purchased 8 dealerships um, with their help and their backing. And in 2024, I ended up selling the majority interest of that business to Michael Joe Cannon and became partners with him, and am currently investing with him and buying additional brands and dealerships. And we've been having a lot of fun growing that business.
Well, that's exciting to hear, and we've been privileged to have partnered with you on some of this growth part of your journey. And it's really encouraging for those out there that say, you know what, you can start off selling cars and you can go through the process and own something because it's a lot harder than it used to be, and it's very capital intensive. So when you look back at that journey you've taken, what would you say is the most impactful thing on the trajectory in your career and organization?
Well, I think, to start with, I found the right group, and I found the right people that would give me those opportunities, right? That would help me grow my career, and also give me the opportunity to own a piece of it. And, I think that was probably most impactful. And the reality is, there were other opportunities, other places throughout my career to maybe, go someplace else, try something different, maybe receive some type of a promotion, if you will, or maybe a pay raise. But I stayed loyal to the folks that, continued to give me those opportunities, and it paid up dividends in the end.
Well, that's so encouraging to see and to hear. And it's also encouraging for me because I've seen a lot of the team that you've built because you've also paid it forward in a lot of regards and helped build other people's careers. And now to see this partnership with Canon. So we know you guys are actively seeking other acquisitions. And as we transitioned this conversation without giving away your secret sauce now, what are some of the key things that you would look to suggest for buyers as they're going down this journey and they're thinking about buying that next store, that first store, or growing as you have?
Well, for me, I've been very successful in making sure I found the right acquisition most of the time. There have been a couple of instances where I have made some mistakes, and I would say that, you know, your location is going to be a primary driver in your success moving forward. You got to have the right location, and you know the brand is important, but I wouldn't say it's as important as the location. And then having the right leader, if you will, that you can put into that store that you know is going to make it work and make it run is imperative. So you got to have the right location, you got to have the right brand, and you have to have the right leader. And I think with those three components, it's a recipe for success. And if you don't have those three components, can you still, pursue an acquisition? Absolutely, but it's just going to be that much more challenging.
Well, and I think you've mentioned that too, that sometimes you try to get it right, but you don't. And that's why making that decision to do strategic divestitures on occasion is all part of the growth. And as you know, and you and I've talked about this before, I enjoy fast cars.
Hmm.
And as I've been spending time on the track, I've learned the secret to going faster is knowing how to brake better. And I think that's an important lesson that you pointed out. So let me ask you this, because we know you look at a lot of deals and we see that. So what characteristics make you and the Canon organization say, okay, let's take a second look at this. Let's look harder at this one because this might fit what we're trying to do. Is it just the location or is it more?
There's more to it. I mean, obviously, we look for the low hanging fruit, right? We look for maybe where stores might be underperforming. And in other cases, we look at if they're overperforming, So are we going to be able to maintain what they're doing, or are we going to be able to improve on it? Those two questions are the things that we sometimes ask ourselves first. And, you know, and then again, I can't stress enough who's running the deal, and do we have some runway with that person, or do we have to bring in help from the outside, and where are we going to acquire them from? Do we have somebody on the bench that's ready to move up? Those are some things that we look at as we're moving towards an acquisition. And again, it's not just location, but it's what's the low hanging fruit if there is any, and can we maintain what they've currently got, and where are we going to focus our efforts on, and how quickly can we make those changes? And obviously, you've got the OEM factor that plays into it, and that's going to, what kind of facility are they going to require? Are they going to get their pound of flesh here? Are you going to have a reasonable period of time to improve that facility, or is it going to happen quickly? Those are things obviously to consider as well.
Yeah, and I think that your perspective is very good for those that are in growth mode because a lot of times people get so hung up with, oh, it's an X multiple for this brand or a Y multiple for this brand. And then they don't look at the fact that, okay, we can move F&I numbers up here, where fixed ops is already performing at 100%
Hmm.
efficient. So they look at some of these things, and that's why I think perform evaluation is so critical on this analysis. And on the opposite end, and you mentioned this, that sometimes you've got to be careful of an overperforming store because are you going to be able to continue running 200% sales effective? Maybe. I don't know. You're pretty good, so you might be able to take it to 300. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I go into these deals with a lot more humility, if you will, than I might have done 10, 15 years ago. And realize that, even though some people may be doing things unconventionally, that may be the best way for those stores to experience the success that they've had. And so I have to also go into it with an open mind and knowing that my way is not always the best. And what made me successful initially in my career may not be the right path forward with some of these new acquisitions. You know, we give each store a lot of autonomy to be able to operate in the way that they see fit. in order to get the best results. And, sometimes that might be different than the way we would traditionally operate one of our stores.
Sure.
Just as an example, we've got a new acquisition coming on board at the end of this month, and we're going to leave a lot of the systems and a lot of the things in place, as opposed to bringing in our, DMS and our CRM system. And we just don't want to overwhelm the staff who's already doing a very good job, with a lot of new procedures and a lot of new systems. We want them to keep doing what they're doing, and we want to slowly make changes to improve that operation. It's not a deal where we're just going to rip off the band-aid, if you will.
Sure. And I think that's very smart on stores that are performing well. You want to make tweaks and adjustments
Hmm.
because you start adjusting too much, and the next thing you know, you're going backwards, not forwards,
Right.
which is a challenge. Well, let me change directions briefly. We talked about the positive. What are some of the hesitations when you look at a deal? You're like, this is just, I don't know if this is the right fit. What are things that really give you pause?
Again, I've got PTSD from the location thing. I had purchased a store, in the mid South. It was a domestic store, and I had thought that there we were just going to go in and set the world on fire there. And it was a store that was just in the wrong location. And regardless of what kind of services we provided, what kind of value proposition we would give the customer, what kind of sale price we could offer in the market, it wasn't enough to drive consumers to that location. We just couldn't get low enough or be good enough, to overcome, you know, maybe a less desirable trade area, if you will. So, the first thing I've got to do when we look at a deal is, hey, where's this located, and is it a 5-year location? Is it a 10-year location, or is it a 50-year location? And what I mean by that is what's happening around it. Are stores closing? Is it, do you see abandoned strip malls? Or is this a growing area where everything's relatively new and expanding, and there's housing and new population coming into the area? So we kind of start there. I look at, the metrics to try and determine uh, if the store is overperforming in any area, and am I going to maintain that? If there's a dealership that's 2 to 1 used to new, I mean, I know how hard it is to get there in some of our operations, and the reality of it is, can I maintain that? A lot of the times it comes down to making sure that, you know, the person that's driving that 2 to 1 used to new
Yeah.
is staying. And who is it? Is it the dealer that's leaving? And am I going to be able to maintain that? I don't know. Those are questions that we have to ask ourselves. So location, people, and brand is obviously important as well. And is it a brand that fits the demographic? There's great brands that may not be the best demographic for certain areas. So or may not fit the demographics for that specific area. So those are some things that we take into consideration and that we're very cautious about. And then nobody likes to, you know I mean, the market dictates a lot of the times the pricing. We don't we got to make sure they cash flow too. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
that's a priority for us. We have to make sure that that deal is going to cash flow based on our performance. And if it doesn't, we have to sometimes walk away.
And that's a great perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think location, as you've brought up multiple times, the people is another big part. And you mentioned that because sometimes you see that performance comes into play, but it's all from the dealer, and the dealer, he's going to be out here at the beach or
Hmm.
and enjoying himself for afterwards. He's not wanting to spend time at the store working after that. So that's a problem that we have, and we see that the people side of things is huge on that. But you are right. I mean, it's cash flow. I mean, banks will always be happy to say, "Oh, we'll loan you this," but the question is, can you pay off the debt? And how long is it going to have? Is it going to take you to pay off the debt before you have to build that new facility, right? Because that comes into play as well.
Yes.
And where's the rent factor going to be after you take into account you got another 6 million in capex coming in. So great perspectives on that. And I appreciate you talking through this. So let's transition a little bit now and talk about the selling of a dealership, because you've actually been down that road as well.
Yep.
And we know that when you talk about the selling, it's not just the numbers. There's some emotional component tied to it. So, and you're in such a unique perspective because you've been down that path. So, as we're talking to some dealers that are on the fence and they're thinking, yeah, maybe I do want to get out or maybe I do want to sell, what is some advice that you would have for someone that's considering making that decision?
Well, I think it's pretty important that you know, you have to bring advisors into that conversation. Okay. And I was very fortunate to have an accounting firm that I've worked really closely with for the last 10 years that, I was able to bounce some of these ideas that we had when it came to disposition off of. They kind of helped me talk through you know, the what happens next stage. And it was just to be able to have somebody you can discuss this with is pretty important. It didn't just all fall on my shoulders. And we looked at before my last disposition, I had my accounting firm come in and just do a financial analysis and model out like the next 15 years on what it would look like owning these stores and what it would look like with a disposition. And we included CapEx and everything into that equation. So I had all of the information that I needed to make a good educated decision as to what should happen next. And so I think that was certainly a benefit. So I would strongly urge people who are on the fence or considering, make sure they've got advisors that can help give them real world advice
Yeah.
to help them make those decisions. And and then when it gets a little closer, engaging the services people like yourself who kind of helped us come in and establish a value and determine what the market looked like, and making sure that we were putting our best foot forward when the time came, I think was an important part of that process as well. And then, of course, making sure, you know, you, your business was, fortunately, our business was always in relatively good shape. We were always high performers. And, there was no, um, it was very easy to determine where the profits came from and how they were made.
Right.
And it was a clear path forward for the purchasers when they were evaluating the deal. So I think those three things are very important: making sure you have the right representation, making sure that you've got good advisors, and making sure that you have very clean books as you move into that process.
Well, and I think that's a great perspective to have. And we were fortunate enough to be a part of that process with you. And as you talk through the advisors, it's interesting that there are different people that you're talking to at different stages.
Hmm.
And your accounting firm is you want them to be conservative in their projections. You want them to make sure everything's accurate. And then when you talk to someone like me, and we're like, oh, it's worth a lot more than that. But we also know that there's dynamics that come into play in the market, but we've also found that the numbers are only one part of that decision. And I remember very clearly when we were talking with you, you're like, Jarek, it's not just about the money, it's about the who and how that's going to come into play. And we talked through some of those potential buyers and we were able to collaborate on that and find a scenario that was a win-win for everyone. And in your case, it was unique because you actually got talked into staying on as a partner on that deal.
Yes, yes, I did. And you know, I have kind of a unique perspective in that area. And the reality of it is I did not have to, a disposition was not a necessary deal for me. I was 50 years old at the time, and from a financial perspective, at that time, it just made a lot of sense to be able to pull some chips off the table and have some liquidity outside of the automotive industry. The reality of it is, if you're first generation like I am, building a business in automotive, every dollar you make tends to get poured back into the business, especially if you're expanding. I mean, I may have had some money on the sidelines, but every time I bought another deal, that pot started, obviously getting depleted. And you know, to be able to find the right buyer for these stores, to be able to find somebody that could help continue to provide the career path that I had laid out for these very talented folks that we have throughout our organization was very important to me. And, you know, if I didn't have a comfort level with the buyer, it wouldn't move forward. And knowing that those people would be taken care of in that way.
Well, and I think that's a key component you mentioned, and I do want to circle back around briefly on as you talked about the structure and so forth. That's why the advisors are so key, and that's why it's so important to have your accounting firm involved. But for those that are considering selling, I think a lot of people don't realize there are options other than just selling everything.
Yeah.
And that's some scenarios that you have to talk about. You have to figure out, okay, is a partnership a good option for me? Or do I want to look at how do I help the next generation? Because these deals get expensive. And these are conversations that you have to talk through and plan for. And then you talked about your people, which is key because we know how much you care for the people. We see this with dealers when they have 20 and 30 and 40-year employees there, and they want to make sure they're doing right by them. In some cases, selling is the right decision for them because you're not able to manage the growth that we see coming in this industry. And you see it better than a lot in the roles you've had on dealer councils and national dealer boards and everything else. It's changing. And it's tough when you got one or two stores.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, consolidation is something that's happening throughout our industry. And, you know, what we found also is that the more rooftops we add, the more employees we add, the more efficient we can become in a lot of different areas. We've got centralized accounting, we've got centralized business development, in both sales and service. We've got centralized payroll. There's just some things that we've been able to do that, frankly, have in helped our economy of scale and helped us do it for less and with less people. So, um, that obviously helps the bottom line and helps us to be a lot more efficient with the folks that we have.
Well, we see a lot of this as we get into deals, and you talked also about having the clean financials and knowing exactly what your numbers are. Do you have any advice for things that you say, okay, if you're thinking about selling next year or 5 years from now, make sure this is cleaned up or make sure this is ready for that as you've been through that.
I don't have any specifics necessarily that I can comment on, but I've looked at several deals where, you know, things have just been different. Where, you know, the, you look at the new car number, but it's not really the new car number because they're selling new cars to their rental car company and then disposing them as used cars. And, there's kind of a coconut shell game going on with different things, or, the internals not lining up the way it should on the in the service side of the thing, or they got a bunch of obsolescence in parts that you have to work through. I mean, there's a lot of things that dealers can do to make sure that they're in a position to command, top dollar, I would imagine, for their dealerships. And that's, clean up their inventories, make sure they, don't have a bunch of previous year model new cars out there. Make sure they don't have a lot of obsolescence in parts. Make sure their schedules are clean. Make sure, all of the stuff that you're looking at is accurate. I mean, if you're looking at a financial statements which shows that, a dealer made, $500,000 in their fixed operations department, but you look at the 13th statement, they wrote off $150,000 in unpaid warranty claims. Well, they didn't make $500,000. They made 350,000. So that affects, valuations and pricing and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think you want to find that out in the due diligence stage. Then you could look at a repricing event. That's never good for anybody.
No, and I think a lot of the things you talk about, frankly, are what you should be doing if for good operations, right? I
Yes,
mean, you
that's
should be
another story
checking
altogether.
should be
But
checking your obsolescence and have a used car parts policy in place that you don't end up
yeah,
with those age cars
yep,
and all that. So those are things that we see that when you see a quality run store, hey, you're saying, okay, I can pay a premium, and then you go to that next question. Okay, who is the person responsible for it? Is that the used car manager that's 69 and is also going to be retiring when the dealer
yeah,
retires, or is it this guy that's just really getting his feet wet, and we know we've got a great runway to continue building, and hey, who knows, maybe I can take him further and get him a store in a few years as we continue to grow our plan. So
absolutely.
So that's great perspectives all the way through. And I appreciate you talking through some of the side on the seller side, because I think it is a critical component. Well, this has been a great discussion, but I want to change directions a little bit because I think you've also got some very unique perspectives other than just being a buyer and a seller. You serve on various boards. You've been very active uh, on a lot of things that help shape our industry. So let's talk a little bit about the future of dealership ownership and what you're seeing out there on some of your trips to DC or on some of the board trips that you've been a part of. So tell us, Ryan, what are some of the conversations happening out there that dealers are concerned with, or things that you see as things are changing in our industry?
Well, I think I can say this with a lot of certainty. The dealer franchise system is by far the greatest way to retail cars in North America, without question. And I am very confident that that franchise system will continue to operate in a similar manner for years to come. Um, but we are challenged with, some headwinds, if you will. And one of those is, for example, the FTC, which we discussed this morning, the Federal Trade Commission and their guidance that has come out, is gonna be a challenge for some dealers to comply with. There's gonna be some um, there's going to be some folks that maybe take the wrong path and get their hands slapped and fines along the way. And nobody likes a tremendous amount of government intervention in their industry. And it's becoming, there's more and more of it. um, and the FTC is certainly flexing their muscles when it comes to that. China is a threat to the United States. China is producing more EVs than any other OEM in the world, and they're dominating in every country that they are in, with the exception of North America, and they're not allowed here. And I think the reality of it is we're okay with free trade, if you will, but not when the government is a partner with the OEM. And with China, make no mistake about it, the government of China is partners with their auto industry. So those are challenges that are coming. EVs were an issue a few years ago. I think the reality of it is most people have woken up to the fact that EVs are going to be a part of our future, but it's going to be when the consumer is ready to take that leap. We're not going to force it down people's throats. I mean, I drive an EV. I love the technology. It works well for me. I've got a charger at my home. I've got a charger at my office. I don't have to go to a gas station. It performs extremely well. Um, and I've been very impressed with it, but it doesn't work for everybody. And to try and force that down people's throats is really not what capitalism is all about, if you will. So I'm glad we've reversed course there, but I do think EV adoption is going to continue to increase in the same way that I mean, probably years ago, you were mixing oil and gas in the blower and blowing your leaves out of your driveway. My guess is now you have a lithium battery that you plug into your blower, and that's what you use. And I think that's the case with most people, but it wasn't forced on you. It was something that gradually happened over time, and now you wouldn't probably consider doing anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the direction we're going to see EVs go as we move forward. But fortunately, it's not going to be a something that's forced down our throats. Um, and I mean, we continuously work to strengthen our franchise laws in our state. We've got great ones in Alabama, and that protect us and protect our industry. And I think that's very important for dealers to make sure that they're advocating for in their local state associations.
Well, wow, that's a lot that you've covered there, which is all good. I do want to circle back around on the FTC that we're seeing, obviously after the action letters that were sent, and in fact they're really was supposedly thought the court was overturning some of this, but apparently it's not. I think it comes back to the fact that dealers should just be doing what they're supposed to do, but they've also got to have processes in place because it's not just that they're responsible for what your ad agency is putting out, but it's what your people are putting out. They could go post something on Facebook and the next thing you know, it comes back to you. So how do you get those processes in place to stay on top of all of that?
Well, it's challenging, and that is one thing that I think consolidation helps with is you can appoint champions for that kind of monitor all of that are focused on that on a regular basis. But you've got so many different avenues in which we market and advertise automobiles, whether it's, social or TV, radio, online, through third-party websites. I mean, SEM, it's just constantly putting information out there and to make sure that each and every piece is accurate, is a challenge. And I mean, that's really where the FTC enforcement is scaring dealers. Is it's not that we don't want to do things the right way. Most
Right.
good dealers want to be transparent with their pricing and do the right thing and be able to provide their customers with, um, information in a timely manner. But you know, we also want to provide them with all the information that they need to make a good decision. For instance, a lot of our manufacturers offer incentives, rebates for financing with the OEM's captive finance lender. They will allow you rebates or incentives if you're in the military. We want to share all that information with our consumers, and we need to find a way to do it in a format that doesn't violate these FTC guidelines
Yeah.
and keeps us on the straight and narrow. And I don't think we've probably, as an industry, done a great job of that in the past. But change doesn't happen on a dime. It doesn't happen necessarily as quickly as sometimes we like, and it's going to take some time to get there. And I certainly hope that the Federal Trade Commission will be lenient as our industry makes some of these shifts. But my guess is that you better do it pretty quick,
Yeah.
or you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So, we're working at a much faster pace, I think, than what we've been used to in the past.
Well, and I think that's it's fortunate for dealers out there that we've got support systems with NADA and our state associations that are one able to provide training and two able to provide advocacy. But we know you're very involved in that as well, and you've actually been to DC multiple times. What are some of the misconceptions that you're hearing from policymakers because they don't always understand the auto industry in those conversations that you've had?
You know, Interestingly enough, I mean, most of those folks in Washington like our business and support our business, and also understand the importance of manufacturing automobiles in the United States. I mean, the reality of it is we represent a state, Alabama, with what, six, seven manufacturers right
Right.
now. I had one legislator say, "Yeah, we tell Michigan, hey, Michigan, hold my beer. We do manufacturing down here in Alabama, right?" So I think it's important. I think they all understand the importance of it, but they don't necessarily understand the nuances of our business. And I think it's important that we have representation in Washington to be able to explain that to those legislators. And fortunately, we've got Bernie Moreno, who's a U.S. Senator from Ohio, has been a big advocate for us in Washington. He understands the industry, he understands the business, and he is talking to the people that he needs to talk to in order for them to get it, if you will. So we are very, very fortunate to have him up there. And if you haven't paid attention to what Bernie's doing up there, I think it's probably worth your while to listen in and to take note.
No, it's encouraging that we do have a dealer in the U.S. Senate, and we have advocacy from people like you that are regularly engaged. And it's just a reminder for all of our dealers out there to get involved with your state associations, get involved with NADA, because it's critical that we stay involved, and so that our policymakers can be made aware of what's out there. Because in reality, it impacts the value of your brand. It impacts the value of your business.
Oh, without question. And I will tell you, advocacy is a privilege and it's a challenge, and we need more people involved in those state associations. Consolidation is a great thing, But the reality of it is, I mean, we went from 500 dealers in the state of Alabama down to like less than 200 because of consolidation. And there's less people that are willing to step up and do what's necessary in order to keep forwarding that mission. And so I think it's important as dealers that not only you get involved, but also get your teams involved, and get your sales managers, your general sales managers, and certainly your general managers involved in your state associations, and make sure they're aware of what's going on in their industry, so that we can continue to develop those future leaders.
Well, I really appreciate you telling us a little bit about what's going on that sphere in the automotive world. Let's talk a little bit about the next generation as we're getting ready to wrap up. But what advice would you have for the next generation of dealerships and those considering ownership in automotive? And what are you optimistic about overall?
Well, again, I think I talked a little bit earlier about the franchise system here in the United States, and it is by far the absolute best way to retail automobiles. So I and to service automobiles. And I think every OEM, for the most part, would agree, even though they fight us on that sometimes. I think they all come back to the fact that, hey, we can do it better and more efficiently than certainly anybody else. Um, you know, as consolidation in our industry happens, you've got to be extremely resilient. You got to be able to shift on a dime. You've got to be able to, you know, make sure to strengthen your fixed operations and your used vehicle operations. Frankly, because new cars and manufacturers tend to ebb and flow. I mean, the hot ticket today might not be the hot ticket 3 or 4 years from now, but if you have strong fixed operations and have strong used car sales, you can pretty much survive and uh, uh, thrive in any environment.
It's so good to hear directly from an active dealer who's involved in acquisitions, dispositions, the process for advocating for a system that is so important, the franchise system we deal with. So as we're wrapping up, we're going to go through the lightning round. So this is just real quick in closing, just real quick questions, quick answers, and then we'll wrap up as we go from here. This is always a fun part. Biggest seller mistake?
Pricing,
Pricing too high, too low?
pricing too high,
Okay, good. Biggest buyer mistake?
becoming emotionally involved.
That's good. Okay, and we do. It's hard to separate the emotions. Great. Best acquisition advice that you personally received?
You'll forget about how much you paid for it in 10 years.
That is true. I love it. And final lightning round question. One word describing today's market.
Resilient.
I love it. And we see that in automotive industry. In fact, I think a slide was put up earlier today and they showed that from 1984 to 2026, we still run the same net to sales number year in and year out, no matter what else is going on. So it is resilience that automotive has. So thank you, Ryan. This has been outstanding. You've given the listeners a lot of great perspective from an operator, from an acquirer, from an industry advocate, and from a leader for dealerships out there. So when someone's preparing to grow, preparing to transition ownership, or simply trying to create more value, the message is clear. Preparation matters. Leadership matters. People matter. Thanks for joining us on Driving Deals, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerrick.